we've had people with dementia. I wasn't sure what the reason, but they had dementia. And after using C60 for several months, they were able to get back their driver's license. They remembered how to play the banjo again.
Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Josh Helman, and I am really excited today to be interviewing Ken, who is the founder and chief science officer of Shop C60. And so we're going to talk all about C60, how it can help your health, and specifically why you would be concerned about it if you have Alzheimer's or a family member with that condition. So, Ken, first of all, thank you for being willing to be interviewed. I appreciate you.
Oh, glad to be on and talk to your patients.
Cool. And you know me, a science nerd, 2 degrees of biochemistry. If you could just share with people the origin story. I mean, this sounds like, the cartoon from Spider-Man. It's like, a radioactive. You were involved with radioactivity, and you came up with a cure, and it turned out to be C60. But I'll let you tell this story.
Okay, well, just a little thing for people to know. C60 is a carbon molecule of 60 atoms, and it's shaped just like a little soccer ball. You can probably see it behind me on the back screen there. And it was discovered in 1985. It actually solved a long-standing mystery in astronomy. And then they got a Nobel Prize in chemistry because it's like the first molecule. It's like a spherical cage-like molecule, all of the same element.
In 1996, yeah.
Yeah, and 3 guys, Harry Croto, Richard Smalley, and Robert Curl. There was actually, it started with 5 guys, Sean O'Brien and Jamie Heath. They didn't quite make it. They're all a bunch of old professor emerituses that were doing all this work. So, so they figured they better give them a Nobel Prize fast before they're all gone. And actually, its scientific name, people call it carbon 60, but its scientific name is Buckminster-Fullerene, which is because if people remember the polymath Buckminster-Fullerene, he made those geodesic domes. And he actually predicted the existence of this molecule, decades before it actually was found, and he predicted it would have great health benefits. Now, exactly how he did that, we don't know, but that's why it's named Buckminster-Fullerene. And it wasn't until the early 2000s that they didn't really any testing because it was hard to make. And like one of the famous first studies was the Botry study. That's the last name of one of the doctors involved, I think the principal. And they tested it for toxicity, but instead they found it actually increased the lifespan of test animals by 90%. So that's kind of the that's the backstory on it. Now, how I came about it, I was working on a fusion reactor project, and a lot of the people who worked on it were like
Just to be clear, you are a nuclear physicist or scientist, right?
Scientist. I'm a nuclear scientist. My degree is not necessarily in physicist, but I came in big. And so there's a lot of late professors this and dead doctors that associated with it. So, I wanted to get something for my crew and myself, so we didn't end up in that category. So I went out and I did some research, and I discovered this stuff called carbon 60. And, they gave it to one set of rats, and then the control group, of course, didn't get any. And they hit them with a fatal dose of radiation. Pretty much all the C60 rats lived, where the entire control group, of course, died. And after I learned about that, I said, oh, that's the stuff for us. So I got a couple supplies, and we took it while the experimentation was going on. And we're all still around, by the way. So I guess it worked for that thing. But I kept taking it even after the experimentation was over because I felt it had more energy and like the afternoon blahs you get sometimes after you eat lunch, down at the Oriental place, when we go to sleep, that kind of went away. So, but really kind of caught my attention was when I went to see my optometrist, and about 7 months after I started using C60, and my DRUs, or dry macular degeneration, had completely disappeared. And my optometrist was rather surprised by this because he'd actually never seen that happen in his many years of practice, because supposedly macular degeneration is a incurable disease state.
Wow. And is it okay to call them buckyballs? I mean, what are you?
Oh, buckyballs. Yeah, I'm sorry, I should tell that. Yeah, buckyballs is a nickname. So that's the affectionate nickname is buckyballs. And so you'll see them all that they usually C60 and buckyballs are their nicknames. Oh, and on the macular degeneration thing, my electrical engineer, Gary Rodriguez, had developed, actually, he already had wet macular degeneration. It was getting really, really bad. Yeah, he might have to quit his job as an engineer So I went out and made a preparation of C60 and MCT coconut oil. So for those people listening out there, MCTs, medium chain triglycerides, they can be turned in by your liver into ketones very quickly. And then your cells could use them as a flex fuel instead of glucose, because Rodriguez had type 2 diabetes, which probably brought on the extreme wet macular degeneration. So he took a tablespoon of that a day for a little over a year, and his severe wet macular degeneration completely disappeared as well.
Which is remarkable, because, the eye doctors I talk to, normally wet macular degeneration is hard to treat.
Yeah, there's no treatment. Yeah. I had talked to my optometrist about it because it was slowly progressing. I had it for many years, and I was doing like the lutins and all the things they recommend. And I asked him about medications, and he said he would never prescribe the medications because the side effects were worse than the disease. So I just was trying to stay healthy, but that's this kind of and because of that, and my friend Gary, I started learning how to make formulations of C60. And I shared them with friends and family, obviously, and then I shared them with alternative healthcare professionals who had good results themselves, and they shared it with patients. One thing led to the other, and eventually it led to the company. So that's the story in short.
That's great, and obviously we don't want people to start taking medications or supplements without talking to their own physician. And and just to start off with another disclaimer. We don't, you wouldn't recommend, people taking C60 who have bleeding disorders, right?
Yeah, that probably was. One of the things is the counterindication, just to get it off the table, is what we don't recommend C60, people taking C60 with blood thinners. Because what happens is, a lot of times blood is, quote, thick because of low mineral corticoid production in the adrenals. Well, C60 restarts the mitochondria and the adrenals, and the mitochondria make pregnenolone, which is the precursor molecule for all the hormones. And so your mineral corticoid levels go up, and now your blood isn't, quote, thick anymore. And if you're on a blood thinner, then it's actually too thin, and there could be serious health causes for that. So, yeah, consult with your doctor before using C60 if you're certainly on blood thinners.
Awesome. And if we could also just talk about the structure a little bit more, you're showing a ball. Well, first of all, as you alluded to, this was, I guess, first detected not here on Earth, but in outer space.
Yeah, there's a stuff called DIBs, diffuse interstellar bands, and that's in the infrared band. And there was it was absorbing. So it's somewhere between, in between the stars, there's this material that's absorbing in the infrared band, but it was really a big band, so it had to be like a molecule. It was too big to be an atom. But what could survive in the high energy radiation of space? And there was the whole process of discovering it. I think actually Harry Croto knew what it was, had figured out it was a spherical fullerene, and then the whole process of discovering it. I mean, they had to actually make. First, it was hard to make. They eventually figured out how to make it. They zapped a laser in a vacuum on a block of carbon, and they went and analyzed it, and they found this stuff that had a weight of 702 molecular units, which is, 60 times 12 is 720. So, and then they actually had to make, to really test it, they actually had to make a chamber. It was almost absolute zero, and they had to grow neon frost on the bottom of that chamber. So imagine how cold it is to get neon frost.
Whoa.
And then they drop really cold buckyballs on top of the neon frost, where they kind of like set on top of snowflakes on grass. And then they hit them with that frequency, and it absorbed, and that proved the point. And but it's found on Earth too. It's like in lightning strikes on trees, meteoric impacts. I think they find C60 in the KT boundary, that where the meteoric impact wiped out the dinosaurs. Just a tiny trace. And it's also found in like the burnt wick of your candles, which is about 0.25% C60. So it's found in nature, but it's pretty diffuse. But to actually get high concentration, which is 99.99% the best on the market, it needs to be made in a laboratory.
Got it. And just to be clear, our ancestors weren't exposed to large amounts of this in their daily lives.
Yes.
Okay. And you're showing a single molecule there. I've also read that you can get polymers of the C60. Is Is that common? What are your thoughts on that?
They've done you can attach polymers. There's actually a bunch of patents on it, which it's kind of actually a replacement for HCl. And for some of you listening, you might see, if you read your medications, you'll see HCl on the medications. Well, that stands for hydrochloric acid. So they attach a hydrochloric acid to the medicine. So it will go through your digestive tract, your stomach acids won't be destroyed. Well, they found a similar thing with some medications. They get a ligand, attaches the medication to C60, and it does the same thing. But the key thing about C60, I don't know if you can see this, it's kind of unique in nature. It likes to take a positive charge, but it takes a positive charge not by releasing an electron into the environment for the science nerds out there, but actually by taking positive hydrogen ions from the environment and storing it inside of its cage-like structure, which is the only molecule we know of nature that does that. That's like totally unique. Nothing else does that. And that's probably, well, I don't know if that's part of the reason they gave it to the Nobel Prize, but it's certainly one of the most unique molecules in nature. It's like nothing else.
Wow. So it's interesting though, when you described the original, that they figured out the molecular weight of the structure, I guess there weren't hydrogen ions in it, or otherwise it wouldn't have added up.
Yeah, no, it was some sort of HPLC, I think, that they did. There was all just straight carbons and so and there's also a few other fullerenes. There's a whole class of allotropes with carbon. C60 is like the most common one. There's a little bit made that there's C70, which in scientific studies has had found to have no benefit whatsoever. I think there's a C84. There's a theoretical C550. Whoa. I'm not sure if they've ever actually made that, because originally C60 was just a theoretical molecule. They said it should exist, but, to actually find it and do it, that took decades and decades. And so it's kind of, it's unique. And surprisingly, it was really in the testing for toxicity that they discovered these effects. And, I discovered the one where it increased the lifespan of test animals. And and there was also another study about the same time, because one of the problems is they basically got the rats. They were giving one set of rats got olive oil. One set just got rat chow. The other set got olive oil and rat chow, because olive oil does have some health benefits. And then the third set got rat chow, olive oil, and carbon 60. And basically, when all the control group died, they stopped giving olive oil and C60 to the remaining ones. And then all the olive oil rats died, and then the C60 rats died. And in fact, it was 5.5 years. And there was an accident for the last couple of rats, kind of in this case, it was perish so you can publish.
Okay.
So who knows how long it would have been. So they didn't actually have C60 for the entirety of their lifespan. They only had it for, maybe 20 or 30% of their lifespan. So that's an interesting thing. And during that time, they also did a study with mice, because mice have much shorter lifespans. And they found that C60 completely prevented the cognitive decline in mice.
Do we have any idea why that is, why it prevents cognitive decline and prolongs lifespan?
Okay, well, what it is, it's C60 is characterized as an SOD catalase mimic. And for people listening, superoxide dismutase is a enzyme or antioxidant your body produces to neutralize superoxide, which is produced in plenitude in your mitochondria. Because your mitochondria, those are little organelles in your cells, and they make things like ATP and pregnenolone and precursors for RNA and DNA. They're like little factories. They're like little factories, the little furnaces. They produce pollution. And one of their main pollutants is superoxide. And so as we get older, levels of superoxide, which are produced by the larger cell around the mitochondria, drop. And along with catalase, because catalase and SOD work together to neutralize superoxide. And so your mitochondria basically just have to turn down their production. So energy production drops. And then you have a lot of signs of aging. And like, for instance, my retina is part of the brain. It's part of my brain. It's the same nerve cell. So what happens is when you take C60 is an SOD mimic, takes the place of that missing SOD. So now your mitochondria can turn themselves back on because they're not being damaged by the production of superoxide. And of course, once your mitochondria are back on, they're making ATP, which is the energy molecule of the cell, so the cell can do its metabolism. They also make pregnenolone, the precursor molecule, also the hormone, so all hormone levels rise. In fact, there's like basically 3 main tissue types that C60 is super effective in, because versus the cells of the hormone system, they actually have the most mitochondria of any cell type in the body. I used to think it was the nerves, but they actually have a little bit more mitochondria than the nerve cells. The second type is nerve cells, like especially like your brain cells. Your brain's 2% of your body mass, but it could use somewhere between 20 to 25% of the total body energy. So that means you got have to have a lot of mitochondria in there. And then in the muscle cells, especially the heart cells and maybe other smooth muscle types, because they have a lot of mitochondria because they do a lot of work. And so those cell types seem to benefit the most from C60.
Okay.
And that's kind of its key focus of action.
And how does what happens to the superoxide molecule? Does it get sucked into the ball itself? Like the proton? What's actually happening here?
Oh, this is what's going on in the mitochondria. The C60 passes the gut barrier, the blood-brain barrier. It's actively uptaken through the cells by endocytosis and then into the mitochondria by endocytosis. And what C60 does on the outside of the mitochondria are positively charged with hydrogen ions, which are just basically are basically protons, positively charged protons. So what C60 does in the outer membrane, it actually fills up with these positive protons on the inside, hydrogen ions, and that makes it, of course, positively charged. So it repels off the outer membrane, and it heads toward the inner membrane, which is negatively charged. And along the way, it neutralizes superoxides and the occasional hydroxyl ion until it runs out of its positive ions, and then they stick to it, which make it negatively charged again. So then it's pulled back to the outer membrane, which is positively charged, where it neutralizes them, refills. And so you can have hundreds of thousands of little C60 molecules bouncing up and down inside between the membranes of the mitochondria. And that just lowers the potential or at least the production of superoxides from leaking out of the mitochondria into the general cell. Because superoxide is the most damaging oxidative radical. When it gets out of the mitochondria into the cell, because you don't have enough antioxidants, you get things like cross-linking of proteins. They don't work. It damages RNA and DNA, and it can punch holes in membranes, which causes things to leak out that shouldn't or leak in. So you don't want to have like a high level of things. And the exact mechanism, what happens is C60 actually the superoxide being basically an oxygen with an electron. And oxidative radicals your body rust in, right? So imagine oxygen with an extra electron, that's going to rust the most. And so it'll stick to the C60. The C60 takes the electron, gives it to one of the positive hydrogen ions, which turns it into hydrogen gas, and then the oxygen just goes back to being a regular oxygen and probably back into the Krebs cycle. So and then C60 will just pull another hydrogen ion out of the environment and reset itself. So it can reset itself hundreds of thousands of times, whatever.
Yeah, so it's like C60 is acting basically as an enzyme.
Yes, exactly. But it doesn't burden any of the body's chemistry,
right,
which is really good. And like normally what happens is if you have a superoxide, SOD, superoxide dismutase will turn it into a hydrogen peroxide, and then catalase will come around and turn it into water and oxygen. But C60 does the job of them both in one time. And C60 also does the job of turning hydroxyl ion back into water. It does the same process. It sticks, and then the hydrogen ion is donated to the hydroxyl ion and then turns it into a water molecule, and then the C60 resets itself. And usually that's glutathione's job. So C60 takes that one job. That glutathione's got a dozen other jobs, right? So if C60 takes that job of glutathione, what glutathione you have can go on to do other jobs. And they've actually found, like in the radiation studies, glutathione levels rose even under radiation exposure because C60 was hydroxyl ions, by the way, are the main type of oxidative radical produced by radiation.
Right, and glutathione is the master detoxifier in the cell and in mitochondria. So this all fits. That's just fascinating. So that's the underlying mechanism, and I can understand if you can slow down and make more efficient metabolism in the mitochondria. Yeah, I can see how you can turn back the biologic clock. Is that the similar mechanism why dementia or brain function can be improved?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's two things. Obviously, you're going to get rid of inflammation. C60 is great at inflammation. A lot of, especially autoimmune, like, for instance, a lot of times when you have inflammation, you have neutrophils. Neutrophils are a type, the macrophages get messages that cells are being damaged. They send out the cytokines, and then what comes in, the capillaries kind of leak out, and in comes this army of neutrophils. And neutrophils actually use superoxide ions as like little machine gun bullets to take out bacteria and stuff.
That's like the neutrophils are using it as a weapon, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you have C60 in there, especially if you have autoimmunity or other excessive inflammation, because sometimes the body gets a little going, C60 kind of dampens down that collateral damage so that your other cells don't get it. Inflammation goes down. So that's another thing. So if you were using C60 in the brain, it's going to get rid of a lot of the inflammation. And then it's also going to increase your mitochondria efficiency. So you're making more ATP, which allows the metabolism of your nerve cells to sort of do everything that they need to do, especially process waste and a lot of the amyloid plaques and stuff that are associated with they're just basically garbage, which is building up because your cells can't dispose of it properly. And so it's just, your cells are being full of garbage, and then that causes problems.
Great. And one of the cautions I've seen in one of the studies is that you want to avoid light exposure to the chemo.
Yeah, they had a thing where they left, the guys left a bottle of C60 and oil in full sunlight, basically, for like 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
And what happens is it caused C60 can photooxidize if you get ultraviolet light in there. And then what happens is it causes rancidity in the oil. It would actually stick to the rancidity products and drops all the way down to the bottom of the jar. So in the end, all you have is rancid oil and no C60 in it. And then when you give rancid oil to animals, it's not good. But all the C60 by that time is at the bottom of the jar, basically, where it can't give you any help. So yeah, you need to keep C60. That's why we always put all of C60 products, and pretty much even our competitors, pretty much everybody in industry puts C60 in dark bottles. The same reason you put beer in dark bottles, so it doesn't oxidize. And of course, we have it. It's made in the dark, and we have packaging which has no light exposure. And we definitely recommend when you use it, use it and then just put it in your kitchen cabinet and close the door, and it's all fine.
Got it. Although, like in your case, getting it to improve macular degeneration, guess what? There's light in the eye, so it's not like, ooh, it went out in the light for a second. There's a no.
Yeah, and actually, it was the problem was C60 in association with oils.
Okay.
Because C60 was not being damaged at all by the light. It can live in outer space without a problem. It was photo-oxidizing the oils it was suspended in, and that's what caused the problem, rancid oils. They found actually in human tests, they found like human skin cells which were infused with C60 resisted UV damage, while the cells right next to them that didn't have C60 actually were damaged by UV light. So it's in your actual cells, it's actually anti-UV. Sitting in an oil in a jar, there can be chemistry go on there if you leave it 3 weeks in sunlight. Not a good thing.
Not at all. What about I've heard, I guess, with certain oils, if you refrigerate it, you slow down the rancidity process. Is that true, or am I missing?
No, for basically C60, yeah, that would take years.
Years.
Okay. C60 and for like olive oil or avocado oil, if you keep it in your kitchen cabinet, out of light, it'll last at least 2 years. And MCT coconut oil, we found is still good after like 5 years. We only put 3 on the bottle, but it's still after 5 years. And so just keep it out of the light. That's the basic one. And also another thing about C60, the only type of C60 which is affected is C60 that's dissolved as individual molecules. Now that's either in an oil or be polyhydroxynated. Particles of C60 have no health benefit. They're more like little crystal interface surfaces, and they're shards. They're like sharp, right?
And when we say structures, it would be like these balls just stuck together.
Like thousands or hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of. It'd be like shards. Just like silica is really important for health. Dissolved silica is important for health. However, if I was to grind up a bunch of glass shards and give them to you, that would not be good for health. And it's the same way with C60. It has to be dissolved and to have any health benefits at all.
That makes sense. It has to be dissolved so it actually can get into, I guess, the bloodstream and go everywhere.
Yeah, it comes in with the lipids. C60 has a really good affinity for hydrogen gas, but then lipids are basically covered with hydrogen. And so they just kind of stick to it and they kind of hold together, and it's pulled in through your the membranes that way.
That's awesome. Are there any other supplements you recommend taking at the same time as C60?
We found that hydrogen gas therapy seems to increase the efficiency of C60. That's the only one. Now we personally, I'm a medical doctor. I can't give medical advice, but if I was to say something, I mean, look, most of us are eating the SAD diet, standard American diet. I mean, look, people are deficient in magnesium. Vitamin D, vitamin K deficiencies are huge. Iodine deficiencies are huge. And I could get into the B vitamins, especially as you get older. Your body's ability to process B vitamins, especially B12, goes down. If you were looking on the path to good health, a wise supplement selection that you use is an important thing. And however you do that, consult with your medical professional or figure it out on your own. But it's just our modern diet does not give us the nutrients we really need to stay healthy.
100%. Well, one question people may be having is, how long from when they start taking C60 will they notice a difference? I'm assuming it's not like after the first dose. What are your thoughts?
So usually it's about, people will start noticing things in about a week. After a month, you'll definitely see things. And there's a variety of different things that happen, because once your cells start working, then there's other downstreams. But usually within a week, you'll get more energy, better mental focus. That's what the first things that people do. After a couple of weeks, up to a month, you get more motivation. And one of that problem, what we think, we're pretty sure on that, is dopamine production increases. There's chronic inflammation, and then there's acute inflammation. Acute inflammation is when you sprain your ankle, right? It swells up, you get the pain, the heating, all that. Well, and it immobilizes the ankle, which is good because the ankle needs to be immobilized to heal. But one thing that most people don't know, it also suppresses dopamine production. And dopamine is the molecule that gets you out of bed in the morning. It's the motivation molecule. And obviously, it's great because you want to not have the person get up and walk on the ankle. So it's a natural process. Of course, that goes awry when you have chronic inflammation, like arthritis or gut issues, or there's dozens of different inflammations. And so when that inflammation is tapped down, then that whole process is fixed, and now dopamine levels rise, and people get a notice of rise in motivation. They start, sometimes they start cleaning their house or go do things that they used to like doing because they just now have the motivation. They get out of bed and they look forward to, having the day in the morning.
Right, because dopamine also gets converted to norepinephrine and then epinephrine. I mean, if you got higher levels, epinephrine is, the flight or fight, people suddenly have all this energy.
Yes, so that's one of the things. And then they found some long-term effects, which are interesting. Originally, they, obviously C60 is well known for inflammation. They did a study where they gave rabbits arthritis in their joints. And, that's what they do in science. And then, of course, they injected C60 in the joints, and they found that, yes, the swelling went down very significantly. But then when they actually examined the joints afterwards, they found that the cartilage had regrown to a large extent. And that led to other studies. And they found that what C60 does, there's cells in your body called senescent cells. And these are like zombie cells. The DNA is usually damaged, and normally processes would take it out, right? They go through automatic self-death processes, but a lot of them don't. They just kind of hang out. And one of the ways they do that, they stop providing antioxidants to the mitochondria. They go into what's called a fermentation mode. And just like, when you drink too much alcohol, fermentation produces alcohols, but also lots of other nasty toxins, which are poisoning the cells around them. And so what happens when C60 is uptaken by senescent cells, it restarts the mitochondria, the Krebs cycle. And then those mitochondria, they're like little independent organelles. They'll send messages to the nuclear DNA, and they will not get the right message back. And they will actually explode and cause what's called apoptosis, or programmed cell death. And so what happens is C60 causes a large amounts of senescent cells to go away. And then now your tissues in your body don't have enough cells. And so there's various signaling mechanisms go out, so that causes an increase in stem cells. And so people that take C60 have like a huge increase in stem cell production, which of course makes your immune system work better, makes healing work better, makes your skin. In fact, that's the very first human study of C60, was they actually made it in a cream for Japanese women. And they found that applied topically, C60 decreased lines and wrinkles in Japanese women, which of course your cells, the cell turnover in the skin is what makes it not have wrinkles. So if you have more stem cells, the cell turnover will be more complete and your wrinkles will become less.
And in that study or in general, how long does it take for the wrinkles to get better?
Oh, it takes a couple months. But that whole process, like my macular degeneration, that took like 7 months. Gary's eyes, it took over a little bit over a year. The facial stuff, that's like, I think that was a 3 months they started seeing it. So yeah, those long-term effects of like stem cell turnover and there's another thing what happens is autophagy. I guess it's basically there's a lot of, if your cells are under a lot of stress and toxins, they can't clean up the junk.
Right.
And so once your cells have enough energy, they start, going through and cleaning the junk out of the cells. But that's, the cells probably been building that junk for a while, so it might take several months. So that's another long-term effect. But mitochondria function, that goes up really quickly. And also reducing inflammation. Like you can get mosquito bites and you put C60 on the mosquito bite and about 30 minutes later, the itching goes away. So you can have
awesome.
Yeah, so the inflammation goes down and your energy goes up. But then, when your cells are working, then you get a bunch of long-term effects. But that usually takes months to see some of those things.
But that fits with the mechanism for brain function to improve. So I mean, certainly we know one of the mechanisms behind Alzheimer's is inflammation, and so if we're using a molecule like C60 to decrease the inflammation, it makes perfect sense that brain function is going to start improving.
We've had a lot of success with Alzheimer's patients. Now, I am not a medical doctor. This is not science research. This is strictly anecdotal research, stuff from customers. Like we've had people with dementia. I wasn't sure what the reason, but they had dementia. And after using C60 for several months, they were able to get back their driver's license. They remembered how to play the banjo again.
Wow.
So, and we've also had with adult Asperger's, we've had some excellent results. They actually said for the first time in their life, they felt normal. Their social anxiety went away, which is probably just telling you that there's something wrong with mitochondria dysfunction, because there is a certain number of people that have a genetic allele. It's part of your genes, which causes you to have, like, especially as you get older, lower SOD production or lower catalase production.
Sure.
So this results in, problems, low energy. And so C60 can go in there and replace that. C60 is very specific. It really only interacts with superoxide ion and the hydroxyl ion and nothing else. For instance, it does not interact with the nitrogen oxides. That's the vasodilator, super important. Right. It doesn't interact with hydrogen peroxide. It doesn't interact with any of the body's signaling molecules, none of them. And so they actually did a study once because, they have the radiation stuff, it doubled the lifespan, it's doing all these different things. So they find out at what point is C60 toxic? So in normal scientific studies, they found like 0.1 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, 0.2 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. That was kind of like the health beneficial dose. Sure. So they dosed some rats up to like 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. And that's like 10,000 times what's the health beneficial dose. And even at that extreme level, there was no toxicity because C60, now if you did that with vitamin E, another antioxidant, it would have killed the rats. Right. Almost certain. But with C60, it didn't do anything. Now, you weren't getting any additional benefit by having that extra C60, but because it doesn't interfere with the body's signaling molecules, it only interferes with superoxide and the hydroxyl ion. It has no toxicity at any level. In fact, it's the only antioxidant which can increase athletic performance.
That is so cool. I can think of another one. What about nitric oxide?
Yeah, it doesn't interfere with that.
No. No, you said it's the only molecule that's been shown to improve athletic performance. I think nitric oxide does that too.
Oh yeah, with nitric oxide. But getting nitric oxide, there's special supplements for that. C60 doesn't interfere. That's another thing, especially if people have, I guess, high blood pressure. Right. Nitrogen oxide supplementation. The beets. Sometimes they get it through the beets. Sometimes they have other things. That is an important supplement for people to take. But C60 won't interfere with it at all. So, but yeah, I would definitely nitrogen oxide supplements is there's various ways, but that's a good thing, especially if you have high blood pressure.
Oh, what about because of the effect on the superoxide ion, does C60 have any effect, good or bad, on bacteria or other bugs that might be in our body?
We don't really see anything directly.
Okay.
There may be some effects on anaerobic bacteria. We're not sure. They kind of see something on that, and we're not sure what's going on there because maybe it's interfering with the pathway there, but really we haven't seen it. What happens mostly is like it has been seen to reduce bacterial infections and such in scientific studies, but it's a question on the C60 may have strengthened the immune system, and then the immune system took care of the bacteria. That seems to be more the pathway than the C60 directly interacting with the bacteria. That doesn't seem to be the pathway.
Perfect. And I'm afraid to ask this, but are you aware of any studies on cancer cells? Well, I guess from the original thing, one of the ways that radiation works is it destroys rapidly multiplying cells, and I guess in the original studies, it protected the rodents who had been exposed.
Well, yeah, in the original Botry study, they use what is called Wistar rats. And Wistar rats are a rat that's has characteristics of human aging. That's why they were using it in the study. And mostly Wistar rats die of cancers. And in the C60 group, there were no cancers. Most of the control rats died of cancers. In the C60 group, there were really no cancers or other things like cognitive decline. And that's primarily the reason why they live so long. But this was preventative. If you have cancer, C60 is not necessarily going to do anything for that. That's not been proven. But as a preventative measure in animal studies, it prevented the occurrence of cancers.
That's awesome, Ken. Looking at, I know you're going to conferences, you're reading, you're at the cutting edge of this. What's coming in the next, or what have you seen in the last few months? What areas of research or development involving C60 are you optimistic about?
Well, one is optimistic is new methods of manufacturing C60.
Okay.
Purifying it. Because right now, high purity C60, 99.9%, pure sublimated is more expensive than gold. Now, obviously, it's at low concentrations in your stuff, and not like obviously not solid, but still that makes it an expensive product. But what value is your health, and that's also why you have to be careful, because there's a lot of products out there that are like 99.9% or 99.5%, and those almost always come from solvent based. They use there's an industrial C60 which uses toluene as a solvent to purify it, right? And we use sublimation, which is because of evaporation, no solvents are ever involved. And so if you're buying C60 for using yourself, use sublimated, or sometimes they call it sublime. That's kind of like the other side. You use that type of C60, don't use solvent-based. And a lot of times, they'll say this or that, but when you're seeing sublimation by its very nature is very pure. It's going to make 99.97 or 99.99, however it is, it's very pure. But the solvent-based method comes out at whatever purity they want. So if you're seeing 99.9 or 99.5, that was made by solvents, and that other 0.1 or that 0.5% is toluene or methylbenzene, a known carcinogen, and generally having that in your diet is not a good thing. So I would not recommend that. So that's why you just have to be kind of careful out there. And originally there's just a few C60 companies, and everybody made like a quality product for their customers because they and their families used it, and then it became popular. And basically, we got all of these fly-by-nighters out there that have come out and making products. We have all organic oils, of course, and we also use like the Goldilocks of oils. We have olive oil, the original, the Mediterranean diet, and I also have avocado oil. I made that for myself because I have kind of a sensitive digestive system. So if I, let's say, took an ounce of olive oil, I might have to go visit the bathroom after a while. But avocado oil is so much easier to digest than olive oil, and it doesn't have quite the bite. And of course, I put it in MCT coconut oil for my friend Gary, because he has glucose processing issues. We don't put it in things like canola oil or soybean oil, those seed oils that are really high in omega-6s, because that's inflammatory. We don't want inflation. And we don't put it in like the omega-rich things like fish oil and flaxseed oil and hemp seed oil, because that goes rancid so rapidly. If you put C60 in like fish oil and then bottle it and send it to you, it might be rancid, or if it sits on your shelf for 6 months, it'll be rancid. But so we pick like the Goldilocks of oils that are healthy and good for you, but also are stable and last for a reasonable amount of time.
And the C60 is purple, right? Because it absorbs the green.
That's why we call it purple power, and it's we have like purple boxes and stuff, because C60 dissolved in a clear oil turns it purple, And also it's dissolved in like a tan or avocado oil. It turns them like a dark amber. You can tell purity just by visually if you know what you're doing. But, it's also nice to have third-party testing.
But let's be clear. Like, I know if I or have a patient take charcoal, it's going to go out the other end black.
Without being absorbed.
But whereas the C60 is purple, but you're not seeing purple.
Oh, no, nothing comes out there. It's all absorbed. Yeah, your intestine system will take up all that C60 and distribute it through your body in the blood-brain barrier, everything. So it gets things, when I travel, I take activated charcoal because, if I get intestinal illness, I could just take a bunch of charcoal, absorb all the toxins, and go out the back end. But it's not going to, and you should never actually take activated charcoal every day because absorbing toxin also absorbs ions like magnesium and calcium that you need for body health. So, occasional use of activated charcoal is fine for certain situations, but not every day. Don't use it every day. It's not a good idea.
Right. And activated charcoal is basically another form of carbon, not C60. It's another form of carbon. So besides the new manufacturing process, are there any other developments that you're optimistic about?
Well, there is some human studies out there that are going on. They have one but it's not been published yet.
Okay.
It was really useful for post-traumatic stress syndrome with soldiers. But that's still in the process. They just basically, if you get your mitochondria working, ATP, your brain cells are working, other therapies then become much more effective. And it's basically, the key thing is its really usefulness in mitochondria dysfunction. Certain mitochondria, there's like thousands of different mitochondria, quote, diseases, but a lot of them are based on lack of SOD and catalase. And so when C60 goes in there and takes the place of the missing stuff, then you have much better results. Because before C60, it's characterized as an SOD mimic. There really wasn't any way to treat because you can't really, there are no receptors on the outside of your cells to take in SOD. Sure, there's some exosome, packaging that gets taken in, but that's pretty low. And so like there's the big four that, antioxidants. You can, CoQ10, you can supplement for that, and you should, especially. Sure. You can also supplement now for glutathione, because now they have some liposomal glutathione, which will make it past your gut barrier. How well that glutathione gets to the various cells or something, I'm not sure.
Right, and I can tell you, I see much better results with intravenous glutathione than the oral. But yeah, definitely if you're going to do oral, lipophilic is where you want to be.
Yeah. But there was nothing for SOD and catalase until C60. Right. So it kind of fills that spot. So that's there's a lot of alternative doctors who are using it and discovering its benefits in people with mitochondria dysfunction.
That's cool. And as a reminder, mitochondria are present in almost every cell to help with energy production and the removal of toxins, detoxification. So it makes perfect sense. If you can get the mitochondria working again, you can get your health improving too.
Yeah. So and C60 is just one tool, a toolkit for good health. I mean, so if you really want to get good health, you have to get good nutrition, clean water, good sleep, exercise, all those other things. I mean, especially as you get older, good health takes a lot of effort. It doesn't happen like you were in the 20s.
Exactly. Ken, we've covered so many different topics around C60. What would be 3 or 4 points that would be important for people to take away with?
I think what people really notice is the increase in energy.
Okay.
And mental clarity. That is, and then you get the motivation. And then after those 3 are the really core things. And then after that, you get like healing of long-term health problems. They become less and less and less. And that's part of the body, because it's actually the cells are doing the healing. Once you lift the oxidative burden the cells are under, then they can function the way they used to. And then the body heals itself, because no drug or mineral or C60 actually heals anything. It's the body's own cells doing that healing. Whatever we use to help healing is it's just the help. It's not the cause.
Wow, that's amazing, Ken. How do you have a website? How can people?
Yeah, we have a website, shopc60.com. Another place people can go. It's called whatisc60.org. It's actually one of those 501c3s that it's supported by our company and some other C60 companies. It's like one of those nonprofits. And that can give you, whatisc60.org, it can give you the good, bad, and the ugly about C60. So you can see the scientific studies, and there's a synopsis, links to those scientific studies. And you can see, dissolved C60 has health benefits like particles of C60 don't have any health benefits and actually kind of inflammatory, and a few other things, industry hit pieces and computer simulations within based on reality and other things. But it'll just give you a better idea of what's out there and what you can understand. Because and especially for ordinary people that don't have a scientific background, it kind of gives you an understanding of what's going on, what C60 has been found to do in scientific studies. And like on our side, we can talk about human studies. Then there's human cells in vitro in the test tube. But obviously you can't talk about animal studies because animal studies do not necessarily correspond to human studies. So, but you go to whatisc60.org, they put it up there for everybody to see, and we like to support them for that.
That's awesome. And are you on social media?
Oh yeah, we have a C60 Purple Power YouTube channel. We have like hundreds of videos of different types, and we have a lot of doctors like you who have Jess is our CEO, and she interviews lots of alternative doctors and specialists and stuff. So that not even necessarily about C60, but if you do have a health condition or something and you want to learn maybe a little bit more, not that we're medical doctors, but we have a lot of medical doctors we interview. And so you can kind of go there. It's kind of like a general wellness health site and with additional information about C60.
And what if people want to directly contact you personally? Is that possible? And
oh yeah, you can contact us at support@shopc60.com, or you can just email me at ken@shopc60.com. Then I can answer your email.
And really, thank you so much for your time and your expertise in helping create this whole industry and making available. Well, I think this is one of these magic molecules that can be so helpful for people with chronic conditions like Alzheimer's.
Well, I'm glad to do that. We get love letters from people all the time in the health conditions. And I'm sure, this is really the cutting edge sort of technology. 20 years from now, it's going to be ubiquitous, like vitamin C or vitamin D. But right now, it's just kind of the cutting edge. And so you're actually kind of lucky to actually get this information, because a lot of people out there, really 99% of people, have never really heard about C60. And part of our education effort is, talking to doctors like you and other people about, the benefits of C60.
Thanks, Ken.